It's nearly 1st of June, at least when you listen to this podcast on the day when it was published, which is 31st of May. And you might now think, well, it's a new month, Niels. That's not much to announce, is it? Well, it's Pride Month. And when you now think, what was that again? No worries. We're not here to insult you. We're not here to tell you that everything you do is wrong. However, we're going to talk about how honest is corporate diversity. What is that? What is it that they claim that they do, and how does the reality look like? Because 1st of June, it's Pride Month. And when you now think, I didn't know about this, well, at least I have to say, you are not on the best level of knowledge when it comes to corporate diversity. And we have the first point to work on, which is important. The problem is that often when it's Pride Month, organizations do exactly the same. So first, get a rainbow flag somewhere and put it on some flag mast somewhere. So show rainbow colors somewhere, get a bit of paint. And then you do events, very important. You do a couple of events. Of course, you don't pay anyone because you don't have budget for this, right? And now please insert here all the excuses you have why you don't have budget. Yeah. So thank you for these excuses. No one is interested in them. Because when you say you don't have budget for that, well, we know that everything that is really important to you has no budget. That frequently happens, right? We all know that sales, an extremely important department, has horribly low salaries because you have no budget. Oh, wait, you do. Because everything that's important to an organization, you have budget as soon as it is relevant to you. So when you say you do something for diversity and the next moment you ask for, could you do this and that for free? No. I always donate my income, which I generate during Pride Month when I give speeches here or there. That's always donated. However, we have to see that even then, I don't do it for free for you. Very important. I mean, there are exceptions, for example, for fundraisers or charities, but that's something completely different. And I do 10 days pro bono per year anyway. The main issue is that often corporations do the following. It's called pinkwashing. Pinkwashing means you pretend that you are in there for something valuable. You're in for human rights, equal rights, LGBTQIA plus community. But what you're actually in for is, as we say in the UK, the pink pound. The pink pound, because you know that, many of these gay people, right, have no children, and often they both have jobs, so they are dinkies, double income, no kids, many of them. Perfect, let's grab some cash here. And that's called marketing, by the way. That has nothing to do with doing anything for diversity, equity, or inclusion. And if you now wonder, what does this LGBTQIA plus actually stand for? And by the way, here's a very important first point. As long as you ask content-focused questions, it's always right to ask, especially when you say, hey, I don't know. So let's go through this. L is for lesbian. G is for gay. B is for bisexual. T is for transgender. Q is for queer. I is for intersex, so between the sexes that you probably traditionally know or learned at school, depending on when you went to school. And A, often people say ally, but it's actually asexual. However, ally is not a sexual orientation, but I'm not going to argue here. Allies are always welcome. Asexual plus stands for anything we don't know yet, so including anyone that we're not aware of or haven't included so far. How does reality look like? And now we get to the point where people say, I'm just asking this. It must be okay to ask. And the question always is, don't we have other problems? Then, for example, in many languages, in the English language, you don't have that issue. But for example, in German or in French or in Spanish, the gender equivalent and the gender appropriate language. So when you say, don't we have any other issues? Or when you say, diversity again, don't we have any other issues at the moment? Well, here are the news. Professionals can deal with more than one problem at the same time. When you say, don't we have any other problems, you just say you don't want to talk about this, which means you can obviously only deal with one problem at a time, which is not bad, but not great either. However, as a leader, you disqualified yourself by only posing the question. And when you now say, hey, Niels, you just said questions are always okay. No, I didn't say that. I said content focus question. So, for example, when you say, hey, I'm not really sure, what is this transgender and cisgender? And what is trans men and trans women? When you say transgender and cisgender, for example, that is a content-focused question. So cisgender means the gender they assign to you at birth matches your gender in reality. Transgender, this is not the case. And when you often mix up where you say, I don't know what is trans men, trans women, and here, of course, be careful what you assume and be careful what you say. And by the way, asking the question, what's down your pants is, and I put it into polite words, there are trans people who undergo gender confirming surgery. Some of them decide to do gender confirming surgery. Some of them decide not to do that. And what's down their pants is, technically speaking, how do we call it in the UK? Oh, yeah, none of your fucking business. So just because you want to know something, you still have to reflect on how do you ask this. And often when you say it's a minefield, no, it's not a minefield. It's just many people don't reflect on what they ask. If you would see me as a single man saying, how on earth could you put children on this planet? Do you know what the carbon footprint of that is? You would say that question is not appropriate because it isn't. So let's focus on the real content focus question. So I already talked about transgender and cisgender. Please don't say, often people say, oh, so trans women are people who became a woman. Well, they always were a woman. But then you all not normally go for, oh, they were trapped in the wrong body. No, they were not trapped in the wrong body. Nothing is wrong with their body. The perception and how it's dealt with by society, that's wrong. Not their bodies are wrong. And then there were certain transformational aspects that were taken step by step. So these people are included in the LGBTQIA plus community. And when you think, well, this sounds all like a bit of a US problem, isn't it? No, it's not. Ron DeSantis, who's an agitator from Florida, higher ranked in politics, now is running for president. When he announced this, we see that Twitter is not even up to actually deliver a proper interview because sound cut off a couple of times. So Elon Musk, another horrible leader, who also promotes Ron DeSantis, who's an anti-LGBTQIA plus community agitator. And the Christian Conservative Party in Bavaria just invited this man, and the reason is obvious. Conservative parties are losing voters because we have urbanization. More and more people move into bigger cities, and conservatives normally do not do well outside the countryside anymore because the topics are focusing on traditional this and traditional that. It's not really innovative. And people often say, this is just not what we want. We want progress. We need society to change. And so to find any kind of topic, now the CSU, which is also a sister party of the CDU, which is the Conservative Party in Germany, didn't stop inviting Ron DeSantis, the Florida agitator who runs for president in the US, to tell them about how to bring this pseudo culture war over to Europe or to Germany in this case, because they do not have any other topics to talk about. Shameful, put your head down in shame. And by the way, if you now think, how can I spot people who are into this culture war thing? It's very easy because they are going to use one word. And the word is woke. You probably heard the word woke when people didn't like something. So when they say, oh, there's a new beer can, and on this beer can, there's a rainbow sign. It's all about gay people. So first, the rainbow sign is really not about gay people, at least not only about gay people. You're really not informed. But then they assume woke. As a general rule, with zero exceptions, nothing smart has ever been said before or after when the word woke was used as a pejorative. Absolutely no exception. When people, for example, are more inclusive or they take care of women and minorities, human rights, equal rights, then people often scream woke and say, we didn't need that back in the past. However, if you would simply translate woke means that you basically say, oh, I don't like that we now care about minorities and women and equal and human and women's rights. But then you realize saying that openly sounds pretty far right-wing, and you sound like someone who is not of a sane mind because you're not. And then you use woke because you do not have any reasoning on your side. So as soon as you have people using woke, that is not only a red flag, you were just buried in red flags to remove that person immediately or send them to a long training. And I do not mean the $49 online course. That's not going to change anything. You really need to retrain and recoach them immediately, because otherwise you will have a public problem very quickly. So when we talk about equity, diversity, and inclusion, people often mix that up with diversity only. They think it's only diversity. No, first we need equity. And then people often say, oh, you mean equality? No, equality basically means anyone gets the same. I'll just give you an idea. Let's say you want to look over a fence, and the fence has a certain height, but you want to see the beautiful landscape which is behind the fence. So I'll just give you a box. The box is 2 feet high, and you can stand on the box, and then you can watch over the fence, can't you? Of course, your answer would be, well, that depends on the height of the person. Exactly. Equality would mean, oh, when someone is in a social hardship, we just give them $400 or euros or pound or whatever currency you have, and then they are fine. And then you would say, well, that depends. As a single, you might barely survive on that. But when you have children, you don't. And that's exactly the point here. Equity means anyone gets what they need. And that's where it starts. Equity first, diversity and inclusion coming straight with it. You do all three at the same time. However, even in these communities, you have people who keep on discriminating even within the community. What I'm talking about is TERFs, not turd. Turd is what the dog produces, which you then have to pick up. You shouldn't mix up turds and TERFs. However, even if you would, it wouldn't be too bad, and you will know why in a minute. TERF stands for Trans Exclusionary Radical Feminism. And to be very straightforward, there is nothing wrong with radical feminism. When discrimination keeps on going as it does right now, and there's discrimination against women left, right, and center, just look into free enterprise, and you still see mostly men running it many times, not with great performances, but still getting away with it with zero consequences. Trans exclusionary means that these organizations say they exclude trans women from the equal rights movement they are in. You have people in Germany, for example, Elise Schwarzer. She has her merit when it comes to women's rights in the 60s and 70s. Today, when you hear her talking that trans is a trend and people want to become trans because it's just hip and nice and you get the attention of people, you really, and I put it into the most polite words possible, Mrs. Schwarzer, I really question her sanity. She probably is at a point in life where she should just stop talking or read up in science. And you have other people, the far right-winged, Alice Weidel in Germany, Beatrix von Storch, you have Marine Le Pen in France. There are many agitators, even when recently Rishi Sunak said, he wants to have these bathrooms only for these biological genders. These are all people who are in the TERF community. They do nothing else than agitate against a common enemy, so discriminating within the community. And when you have people who say, we protect our community, but not these people in the community, these people are even worse. And there are organizations who did a mistake and then corrected the way how they dealt with it. So there are moments where you can simply say you do a U-turn and get it the right way. And I give you an example. Terre de Femmes, a very important women's rights organization. They have lots of funding for women's houses, for safe spaces, for protective places. And of course, they also protect trans women. However, there was one person, that person hasn't heard the bells ringing for a long time. That person put up a scientific paper, which unfortunately ended up on the website of Terre de Femmes, which said that when, and that's their wording, I apologize in advance, when men want to become a trans woman, these are only sex offenders who change their assigned gender to go into, for example, women's saunas to then sexually offend or sexually attack women in their safe spaces. And needless to say, there's a 0% 0 pieces scientific evidence for this nonsense. If you sit there as a man right now and someone would ask you, do you want to become a woman with all the disadvantages that will have in your life? Most people will say, absolutely not. Unfortunately, many immediately say, I don't want to queue at the toilet so long. That's not the whole point here. Although toilets, for whatever reason, are a big issue in the US about who can go on which toilet, while at the same time still there were 0 scientifically backed fact-based offenses by trans women against other women in their spaces. So when you look into this, when you have people who discriminate, that's bad. When you have people who discriminate within the community, then that's even worse. But Terre de Femmes then decided to talk about that, and on board level decided that they take down the unscientific paper, that they apologize publicly, and that they say, we, of course, protect trans women. And the only person who was against taking down that paper from the website was the person who put it on there in the first place. That TERF is absolutely useless and should leave the organization and remove the harm from the organization quickly. I mean, this person now went on Twitter and said, we have to save Terre de Femmes, and then hashtag save TDF. Yeah, we have to save Terre de Femmes from you. So as soon as you have reasonable people and not this Brabandt, not this person that has a pseudo-scientific approach against trans women, then you can look into how is your organization doing. And the first question is look into diversity. And of course, I will now know what you think. You think, it's about men and women, right? Yes, but not only. So first, there are more than 2 genders. And I'm not going to discuss that with you. If you think there are just 2 genders, you ignore basic science. And it's available left, right, and center that there are more than 2 genders. If you say there are not, it's like saying there is no gravity or light doesn't exist. if you want to say that, fine, but stay away from any organization, stay away from any job with accountability or responsibility. Just go somewhere where you are less of a burden than you already are. So, of course, you can start with men and women, but that's not everything you have to look at. But what you could do, please don't go for the binary gender model of men, women only, but just go on the 3 highest levels in your organization, and then the highest 2, then the highest 1, and look at men, women, what is the percentage? And I can tell you, many organizations then go for, we have that percentage of women in the organization. Yeah, that number is the typical thing that they did for decades. On the highest level of decision making, what is the share of female people or people who are non-male, at least, on that level? And normally it is pretty low. From there, you have to continue. Look at sexual identities, look at gender identities, look at neurodiversity. How are people dealt with who have depression or who are on the autism spectrum, the autistic spectrum? The main question is you have to follow up with. The main question is, how non-diverse are the different levels of your organization? And with a very high likelihood, you will come to the conclusion they are pretty non-diverse, which is bad, but it's a starting point to change. But here's the important point. What is not enough is to put a flag up every 1st of June, to put a Facebook post or a Twitter tweet or an Instagram story or a reel, whatever else. Just talking is not enough. And as soon as you don't invest money, proper money into charities or proper activities with professionals who really change something, you are doing nothing else than pinkwashing and marketing. And that will end up with a so-called call out. If you're lucky, you get a warning. Most likely you won't. You will just from one moment till the other face a massive so-called online shitstorm, online and offline most likely, where people have a go at you for the dishonesty that you just serve. I give you an example. IBM last year had a rainbow flag in the logo on LinkedIn. Not in every country, of course. In Saudi Arabia, they didn't. And meanwhile, the LGBTQIA plus community got together and we have a network where we personally take care that your organization will receive financial harm with, for example, not winning public bids, not getting business, not being considered an appropriate supplier, or being put through the hardest kind of negotiation to bring down your profit margins down to 0 for a while, because that is unfortunately the only language many organizations understand. As soon as you see you lose money for being non-diverse, that's when most organizations suddenly change. And by the way, I do not want to pretend that my industry is doing particularly well. The training, speaking, coaching industry is as non-diverse as it gets. We have speaking associations. When you look at the size of the speaking association, they are, of course, not the trade body of the speaking profession. They pretend they are, but they are not. We had horrible offenses. A former president in the US of a speaking association told me, seeing your pronouns on your profile is the only thing I need to know about you. Before that, he said, toxic masculinity doesn't exist. And that person got away with 0 consequences. We had so-called humor where a German vice president of a speaking association had jokes about gay people and Jewish people in Germany, jokes about Jewish people and the Jewish-Palestinian conflict. Seriously, 0 consequences here as well. This, by the way, escalated so badly that it ended up on the table of the Berlin mayor Klaus Lederer, who gave it to the academic senate. So a visiting professor who also was engaged in that speaking association proactively ended his academic career with it. Congratulations. And that's just the taster you received here. Non-diverse initiatives, especially on, for example, fairs and expos, were pretty common. We had it in Germany. Hubertus Heil, the former secretary for work in Germany, had an initiative, Future of Work, got together 7, 8 people, all of them white, male, straight, cisgender, and older than 50. So obviously, when you're not that, you're not part of the Future of Work. Press jumped on it, massive catastrophe. The initiative fell apart within days. We personally took care of that. Injustice always goes against the same 2 groups, women and minorities. And when you now still wonder, why should I care? I tell you why. And I'm going to name 3 people in particular, because there are people who do not have to deal with that. There are people who could say, look, I know I have a certain birth privilege. And by the way, that includes myself. I'm an openly gay man, disadvantaged, acknowledged, but I'm male, I'm white, I'm cisgender. That is a massive birthright privilege. And when you now say, no, it's not, I ask you one question. I started to be self-employed on the side at the end of the 90s. Let's just assume I'm not an openly gay man, which was challenging enough back then, especially when you have your coming out in a bloody village. But then you become self-employed. So you put yourself in the eye of the public on the internet, including your coming out, which is not easy at all. However, when you now say, hey, Mr. Brabandt, you just worked hard and see what you achieved, which is, by the way, achievements are something very personal. We can't generalize that either money or being known or having a business is by definition successful. But when we stick to that definition that some people have, if you say there are no birthright privileges, compare me, male, white, gay, cisgender, and now another person does exactly the same thing I did, but that person is a black transgender woman. Do you think the black transgender woman will receive the same praise I received for the result? Of course not. And you know that. That's birthright privilege. I'm going to mention 3 names particularly here. And the first one is Jerry Brown. He's the owner of MPI, a large training company in the UK. Grew an amazing business. I'm part of it. He took me on board. And this owner of the business, he's now semi-retired, does golfing, 2 days a week he's in the office. He now handed things over already to others. He could say, hey, I earned my money. I don't have to deal with this. And he was on the frontier of diversity, equity, and inclusion training, where in the beginning you only poured money into and didn't make a single penny with it. And he could have easily said, not for me, thank you very much, or thank you, no, thank you. But he didn't, because he knew it is the right thing to do, not to overlook or ignore open discrimination in organizations. And by the way, if you want to talk about others, because when people say, well, in Germany, maybe it's different, yeah, in a negative way. Germany's probably a decade behind what you know from the UK or the US. And I named 2 people particularly here. One is Steffen Ritter, who has an amazing training company focusing on the insurance industry. And Steffen Ritter could easily say, hey, I'm white, male, straight, cisgender, grew the business. And in the insurance world, it's basically non-diversity anyway. The board levels and decision-making levels are male, 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 white, male, straight, cisgender. And I just coast off on that because I'm an external training supplier. I don't have to deal with these issues except when they ask me, and they don't. But that's not what he did. I met him just recently in London, where I went to a beautiful Swiss restaurant in the heart of Soho. And he asked in-depth questions to understand the community, to understand diversity, equity, equality, although we focus on equity and inclusion. He doesn't have to, but he focused on equity, diversity, and inclusion to ask, what do we do? What are the club? What are the circumstances? How does it look like in society? What can we do? Etc., etc., etc. Same applies to Thorsten Jeckel, who I just met last weekend in Berlin. Thorsten Jeckel is an amazing expert on digitization. He could have said, look, I have my clientele, I have my clients. He's a very successful entrepreneur. He has a very proper, very successful track record in free enterprise in the real world. He could have said, look, I am very sorry for what happens to you, but it's none of my business. I coast off on what I have. And he could easily do that until he retires, probably 20 years longer if he wants to. Many of us, by the way, won't retire because we like our work. So we just keep on working and do a bit less. However, these people actively engage and want to know how to deal with that and how to make it better. And that's the starting point where every single one of you who's listening right now can change a lot in your organizations. Because when you still have people who say, oh, we don't really need pride anymore. It's also equal out there. I've seen so many gay people on TV now. It's perfectly normal. No, it's not. It's far away from that. I can tell you only when you have people who really say, do we still need pride? That is unbelievably uninformed, non-informed. And sorry to be that straightforward. It is unbelievably stupid. If you have people only asking that question, which, by the way, is not a content-focused question, these people cannot sustain on any leadership level or any level where responsibility or accountability plays any role. I can only tell you what my last weekend was. And I'm only telling you people who I know. So people who are very, very close to me. One person got spat on for wearing a rainbow bracelet at a train station. By the way, no one did anything as it run. Absolutely no one did anything. And the other person got yelled at to be a faggot on the way home after we were at a gay bar. And these are only people who are very close to me. It was only this weekend. It was only in Berlin Center where you think you can expect the most level of tolerance. So think of what happens in the rest of the world. Think of what does not happen publicly. Think of what happens behind closed doors when they think that no one listens. And when you then still say, we do not need pride, you deserve to be called complicit with the offenders. because silence is violence and passivity is complicity. The main question here is, what do you do that this does not happen? And how, with which consequences do you follow up when you have offenders in your organization? And by the way, I do not care if they cover it up as humor or locker room talk. That's absolutely irrelevant. Hate speech is a crime. And I don't mean a minor offense. It is a massive crime. And when you accept that certain people do these crimes because they're economically important for you, then you join the list of offenders and have to be treated accordingly. Do you want to have that? Do you want to see this happening to you or your organization? Probably not. So where do you stand on corporate diversity? Where do you stand on organizational diversity? How do you deal with organizational equity, diversity, and inclusion? Your call. And of course, there's more than that. I know that this topic often is a topic where people have many questions. And this episode today happened because questions were emailed to me where leaders very openly said, hey, I am at a certain age, I'm from a certain generation. I know I lack knowledge here, and I don't dare to ask in my organization because I think the question alone will be held against me. And I already said, as long as these are content-focused questions, and this person had content-focused questions, this is always okay. Do not blame anyone when they ask content-focused questions. And by the way, content-focused questions are not when you think, oh, don't you think that women are always more emotional than men and men are harder for the accountability job? These are not content-focused questions. These are just brash generalizations. But when people are really interested in learning, don't hold it against them. Offer them help. And when you now say, hey, I need this help and I really have questions, just send me an email. nb@nb-networks.com. And then I'm happy to have a discussion with you or email with you, anything you like. If you now say, hey, I need something very specific, we need a training session on that. Or can you give a speech at our place? Or can you deliver coaching? Yes, I can. But we can also just talk about the open remarks you have or anything you'd like to add or discuss or questions you have. nb@nb-networks.com. And then we take it from there. By the way, if you say, hey, I need more. So, for example, science says that diverse teams are more successful, they are more innovative, they perform better, and more innovation on product, reach out to more clients. They are generally just sustainably better, which is not really surprising. You have a diverse group of clients and customers out there. So, of course, you can only reach out to diverse groups when you have a diverse group on your side. Not really surprising. However, when you say, I need to stay updated on this, and I often forget about that, there's help available. And this help doesn't even cost you a single penny. Go to expert.nb-networks.com. Sign up there with your email address. Every Wednesday morning, you receive one email where you get free access to anything I publish at no charge. Because I know that sometimes people find material from of me or from me on the internet, and often there's a paywall. That's how magazines make money. They can't give it to you for free. But when you're signed up for my list, expert.nb-networks.com, you receive one email on a Wednesday morning. It's 100% content. There's an ad-free guarantee. So feel free to join that list and then stay updated constantly. And the third aspect I always recommend is, and that's the most important one, apply what you heard in this podcast, because only when you apply what you heard, you will be able to have a positive change in course and start or initiate the positive change that you obviously want to see in your organization. I wish you all the best doing that and implementing these steps in your organization. Feel free to contact me anytime. I'm always happy to help. And at the end of this podcast, there's only one thing left for me to say. Thank you very much for your time.